Whenever I assign a term paper, I remind my students of the basics. Make sure you have an arguable thesis statement. Support your claims with compelling evidence. And remember this one? Properly use MLA format. I also share with them some of my pet peeves. I discourage the use of vague, nondescript adjectives like interesting, fascinating, amazing, and incredible, all of which add very little to their argument and might actually weaken it by betraying that they have nothing specific to say. I also recommend that they be very careful about using words like all, always, every, none, and never. Most claims we could make are going to have exceptions. Ignoring the anomalies just so you can sound more forceful in the moment is tantamount to putting a bullseye on your argument and handing the reader a loaded gun. If almost only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, then always only counts when we're talking about the divine. The Bible makes a number of declarations that admit no exceptions. Nothing can separate a faithful believer from the protection of a loving God. Jesus was without sin, and God's grace is great enough to cover over all our sin, assuming we're willing to embrace grace. So when the Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 13 that love always protects and always trusts, is he merely describing a perfect kind of love that humans can never achieve? Or is the very, very high bar of agape intended to inspire conscious, ongoing effort instead of just kicking back and coasting on God's grace? I'm Paul Marchbanks, and this is the 8th entry in a series entitled Beyond the Honeymoon, Romance 101. I'm calling today's talk, Can I Trust You to Protect Me? In Robert Browning's Andrea del Sarto, a poem narrated by a Renaissance painter, the artist declares that a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? This seems to me the appropriate response to divine standards. When Jesus tells his listeners in the famous Sermon on the Mount that they should, quote, be perfect as their heavenly Father is perfect, he's recommending not a fixation on their inevitable failures, but an orientation towards and pursuit of an inspiring, if unreachable, ideal. It's of a piece with his earlier recommendation in the same chapter of Matthew that we chop off our hands and pluck out our eyes if they cause us to sin. Obviously, taking this literally would blind and maim the entire world. Jesus is serious about the weight of sin, as serious as he is about the power of virtue, and so he uses hyperbole or exaggeration in order to drive home a point. In both instances, the impossible standard appears intended not to throw us under the bus, but to remind us that we cannot, on our own, lift the heavy weight which pins us to the ground. Instead, we should combine our efforts with the much, much greater efforts of a loving God who actively intervenes in the lives of those who earnestly seek him. With this in mind, we can return to the idea of always trusting and always protecting and think about how this impossibly high benchmark might apply in practical terms to the lifelong romance. There's a certain logic to the Apostle Paul's placing the concepts of trust and protection next to one another. The Greek word stego, which has been variously interpreted as protects and bears, literally means covers. Apparently, love should offer up some kind of shield in the face of stressful situations, providing protection and support while looking squarely at danger. Pairing protection and trust reminds us that we can't very well ward off attacks and bear challenges if we're anticipating a rear attack from the very person that we're trying to protect. In a healthy relationship, we have each other's backs and struggle the more effectively with all that life throws at us because we trust each other implicitly. We can better protect each other when trust is mutual. To illustrate some ways this might work, let's break human experience into 4 different domains. The material, having to do with tangible, measurable things we experience through our senses. The sociological, which concerns relationships with both individuals and groups. The psychological, which encompasses desire, fear, memory, among other things. And the spiritual, which touches the realm of God and eternity, sin and grace. My beloved and I can offer a kind of material protection by distributing our resources in such a way that we ensure that we have a roof over our head and food on the table. When we encourage one another to pursue friendships that are healthy, that actively engage us and challenge us in all the right ways, as opposed to those loaded down by snark and negativity, then we provide a kind of social protection. If our beloved has been traumatized, as too many of us have been, by sexual assault or military experiences and other life and death situations, then we can perhaps avoid worsening and maybe even lighten their anxiety when they need someone to talk to and we patiently listen as they decompress. If we believe in the supernatural, which is not a given in today's world, we can also provide a kind of spiritual support by covering each other with prayer. Now, these different categories of experience really aren't as separate as I just suggested. I only pulled them apart to help us see different facets of our motivation and behavior. Let's let them snap back together and interact as they naturally do. If, for instance, we seek to protect our beloved by carving out some time for them to get caught up on some much-needed rest, we provide a material service that pays dividends. Getting some much-needed rest obviously rejuvenates the body, but it also helps us to play well with others, to avoid overreacting, and to catch important social cues. Being rested can also help us process unexpected stressors with patience and grace, and even can shape our spiritual well-being. I learned a few years ago that if I haven't been getting my rest and working out tension through exercise, I have a much more difficult time sensing God's presence. If we have souls, and I believe we do, those souls are most definitely embodied souls, closely linked to our physicality. Recognizing all the ways in which rest benefits us reminds us of the old but very practical notion of taking Saturday or Sunday as a Sabbath, an opportunity to thank our Creator for our blessings and to recuperate, setting aside, for a time, the many things that drain us in our modern world. This is where discernment comes in, on a daily basis. How, today, can I protect my beloved in a way that builds instead of eroding trust? What do they want and need that, once given, will be received as care and protection? Time? Touch? Affirmation? Acts of service? If we are truly committed to being trustworthy, reliable protectors, then we need to constantly recalibrate. The heart is a moving target.